you want to extend your health span, red light therapy is one of my favorite technologies because there's so much research and it's low risk, low contraindications. You can use it for a lot of things, like not only just getting it to your brain, but even skin health. There's so much.
Breaking the gray.
Welcome back to the Rebel Scientist podcast, where we decode the science behind peak performance, radical health, and longevity. I'm Chantel, your host, and I'm here with my co-host, the founder of Sarah Thrive, Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, nice to be here.
Nice to be here. And today we're so excited to welcome our guest, Elias Arjan, strategist, futurist, and chief officer. So, am I saying it right, Elias? Growth officer at Proven.
Chief Executive Officer. Yeah, I'm the CEO, co-founder and CEO. Yeah.
Awesome. So we're so excited to have you here. So Elias has been pioneering wearable tech, evidence-informed wellness, and human optimization for over 3 decades.
Yeah, I know. It's hard to believe.
Pretty crazy. And he's here to help us separate
movement.
Yeah.
So you look so good after doing it for 30 years.
I was thinking. So Elias, what got you started in just the health space in general?
I guess I think everybody sort of comes to this from their own direction. For me, I was that kid in high school who was like the last one huffing and puffing around the track, couldn't make it, couldn't do any push-ups in gym class. So I was kind of like a little pudgy, not athletic. I was very intellectual. I was a nerd, basically. And then when I got to college, I kind of decided, I was inspired by the health of my grandfather, actually. To kind of join the gym because I met him and he was in his 70s and he was so healthy and he was healthier than me. I was 18 years old and he was like 78 and I couldn't keep up with him. He had me like trying to work in the yard and do things with him around the house. And I couldn't keep up with him because I was smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol. So I was like, like huffing and puffing. And I realized I'm 18, he's 78. I can't keep up with this guy. Something's wrong. Like I got to do something about this. And so that really is where I started to get into exercise science, competing in triathlons, joined the gym. And I just kind of have always been interested in peak performance, but not just physically, but even, I guess even spiritually, socially, even economically, entrepreneurship, like what does peak performance mean in all areas of our life? And I've just been fascinated to explore that.
Yeah, interesting. So one of the main things that you've done, and I think you're famous in the industry, is for setting up Proven, where you're actually looking to find evidence behind some of these more, well, we used to call it alternative therapies, didn't we? And now biohacking, and now maybe longevity tech, but whatever we're calling it at the time. So maybe explain a little bit more about that. What kind of drove you to set up that company?
Yeah. So I guess when I was a personal trainer, again, going back almost 30 years now, we didn't have a lot of good advice we could give our clients. Like people would come in and we had, some nutritional advice and, more weight, less reps, high weight, low reps. Like it was very, unsophisticated levers we could do and the advice that we could give. And so I ended up not pursuing medicine because that was what I was really interested in, was like high performance, athletic performance. And medicine was really actually more about sick care. And so I wasn't interested in that. And then about 8 years ago is when I first encountered this idea of biohacking before the public, 8 years ago, nobody was talking about this. But I quickly realized the technology has finally evolved to the point where there's all these new things that are evolving that we could potentially use to optimize human performance. And then we also had the tools to measure them. So I ended up joining a wearable tech company and starting to measure how these things were improving people's sleep and recovery and performance. And so I just realized the kind of the work I had wanted to do, at the time was more like 25 years earlier, was now becoming possible. I started doing some early wearable studies and, working with a lot of brands, and that kind of evolved into Proven, where that's what we do every day now, where we have multiple studies running. We're validating technologies. We're seeing how they improve people with wearables, but we also do blood testing. We use a variety of markers, and a lot of our trials are virtual.
I mean, obviously, because you guys are focusing on the credibility of brands. So I just wanted to actually find out a little bit more about that. Say a brand comes to you and they're a startup or they've been in the game for a long time. What's the process that they need to go through in order to sort of be proven approved?
Right. I mean, it is I mean, ultimately the brands are like the sponsor, is of the studies. And we have worked on ways to make it more accessible. It really just depends. I mean, Sarah knows this because she works in the space as well, but there's many different ways to do research. I mean, the smallest form of research is kind of what's very biohackerish, which is like a case report. Like one individual takes a therapy, we monitor their changes, for that one individual. And you see this sometimes now, even being advertised by influencers. Like here was my Aura Ring data, and then I started using this sleep aid, and now look at how much better my data is. That's what we call in science a case report. But we also would call that a biased case report, because usually at the end of that case report, it's like, use my affiliate code to buy now, right? So
Yeah.
what we can do at Proven is we do that analysis, but it's done independently. It's blinded. So the sponsor is blinded during the study, and the participant is blinded during the study. And we collect the data and analyze it and break it down. So, that's one example. And we go from case reports to double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trials in university and academic institutions that are rather very, very complicated with multiple blood marker tests and physical response, muscle biopsies, like you name it, we're doing it. And so, it really just depends on where the brand is ready to go with their claims.
And another thing that I'm interested in is the metrics that you choose, because you're right. I've done a lot of research, and actually, in academic research, they're quite snooty about wearables and things, which I think is a mistake because you're leaving a lot of data on the table, right? So I want to ask you, first of all, what metrics do you use, and kind of do you embrace the wearables? And then maybe even for just consumers who are looking for some good metrics to do for their N=1 studies, where people are just looking to track their own progress. What do you recommend that people use for those two scenarios, either doing the research or for privately just trying to see where you're at?
Well, I love wearables. I mean, again, that's what started me in this type of research, is because I believe, because wearables change moment by moment, day by day. Every night of sleep, you're getting data. I mean, so when I do, some of our studies can be as short as 30 days because we see massive change with certain products within a 30-day window. But that's usually through the biometric changes, right? Because biometrics fluctuate a lot. But what happens is you look at the trends over time. So in 30 days, if you had sort of a baseline trend of your sleep was just going along like this, and then all of a sudden you do an intervention and your sleep just goes like that, that's indicative of something is impacting your sleep in a positive way. And so that's, again, you're right. A lot of the scientists and doctors and people will be, oh, well, poo-poo that. Oh, it's, it's just very anecdotal data, or you can't trust the wearables. But, if you combine that with how the person feels, right? Do you feel that you've also, I actually feel a lot better. I feel like my sleep is better. I feel more recovered. I feel more mentally acute. So we also tie in those subjective surveys. We're tying it together. Just to be clear, we always use subjective reporting. Although, depending on the individual, the nocebo and placebo effects are very strong. So we could maybe go into what those mean for people that don't know them. So you kind of got to come at this from multiple angles. And you're right. The process of figuring out what we test is actually a big part of what we have to do at Proven. Because a lot of times the clients come to us and they sometimes, be quite honest, they even have the wrong idea. They think their product is going to improve this. And our science team looks at it and be like, well, maybe that's not the best metrics to go with. And then we'll add in other things. And we are using a lot of cutting edge stuff. We're not using just but we do, like I said, also use standard blood tests, right? So there's a lot of new ways to do this. And part of what we're doing is getting ahead of, I guess, maybe even where some of the traditional research would be operating in.
What is the sort of the sample size that you guys test or need to test?
So for statistical analysis to actually be effective, you actually ultimately need to start with at least 30 people. because 30 people is where there's sort of like a magic point where if you have 30 people, the statistical analysis, the potential of getting into the science, and again, Sarah would know this, but like good p values and the statistical analysis adding up to something significant kind of starts at 30 people. So really the best studies, a lot of times what we do now is we do a pilot with 30 people, but our goal is to get a sense of where the signal is, and then we increase it. Maybe we need another 30 people to get the statistical significance. Maybe we need to go to 100. 100 is great. For some reason, 100 is also a magic number, even in the research community. If they see 100 people, they can go, okay, well, that's pretty good. Like that's, we like that. But like I said, the N of 1 case reports to me are also still useful, right? So sometimes we will just do, 3 case reports, and that's like a, because really right now the reality is most brands are selling off testimonials, right?
Yep.
Chantal tried it, Chantal liked it, here's my story, I'm Chantal, and here's what happened for me, right? But if I say that, if you go do that testimonial, but now you say, well, look, this was independently reviewed by a team at Proven, and Chantal, you were blinded during it. The company that owns the product is blinded. We've independently validated this, and now that company can go, here's what happened to Chantal when she tried our product, and then you can talk about it. Like that's powerful to people, right? So at the end of the day, this is also commercial research, right? We're not trying to convince the academics that they need to necessarily put all of these products to be validated in nature. We're trying to get some proof because the companies have zero. So going from zero to something is an achievement.
Yeah, for sure. So you've been doing this for a while now. So maybe you can talk about what you think is valid in this kind of longevity world, because like you say, we're seeing an explosion now. You don't have to name names, but you don't have to name names. But I'm interested to know, because obviously there's a lot of different techniques and buzzwords. At the moment, everyone's talking about stem cells or peptides or red light or cold baths or rapamycin.
Regenerative.
Regenerative.
You're right. It's I feel bad for somebody coming in because longevity is finally having its moment, and I'm so happy because we've been working on this, like people like us, we've been inside this for years, or some cases decades, and we're finally having the moment where it's like everyone's coming and like, what are you guys doing? How do I get involved? Where do I start? And then they get this conflicting barrage of information. Well, you got to do this hack and take this. And rapamycin is great, but no, rapamycin is crap. Or, and it's just a complete disaster. And then, so the average person looks at that and just says, forget it. Like I'm out, like I don't know what to do. I'm confused. Or, sometimes what I think is sometimes even worse is they just follow the guidance of their favorite influencer or some ad on Instagram and buy some random product, and then it doesn't work, and then they're just turned off. Oh, the whole thing is crap, And so I'm hoping we can kind of get past this and get things to people that work, because there are things that are really effective. Like people don't realize, I think right now, how good they could actually feel if they were healthy, because so many people are unhealthy. Like they just think that their normal baseline level of cognitive function and energy is just normal. Like I'm so tired, I just want to like lie on the couch and I don't want to go out and do anything, And it's like, no, like if you feel good, like it's not you want to go work out, like you want to go for a walk, you want to go for a hike, you want to swim, you want to, you want to be engaged in life, but if you don't feel good. So yeah, I guess we can talk about some of the things that you want. I know, where do we start? You guide me.
Well, maybe you can tell us what you do, because I mean, people, like you say, it's subjective, but if this is how you're feeling, I'm sure that the audience would be interested to know, what's your routine? How do you get there?
Well, okay, so before we even get into the biohacks, you need to plug in the fundamentals. And this is the thing that I don't like about, because it's a commercial product that people are selling, right? So it's much easier to talk about, to improve your sleep, get your blue blocking glasses, but actually to improve your sleep, like get up in the morning and go out and do some breath work and exercise for 20 minutes with your eyes exposed to the sun. right? And get that signal, because that's the signal that turns your brain on, that basically that's what the sun is for. So if you go straight to your phone, right? And so you go straight to your phone, you're looking in your phone while you're drinking a cup of coffee, and then you go sit in your desk and start working, and you wonder why you feel like crap, right?
Yeah.
So, the blue light blocking glasses before bed aren't going to help if that's your lifestyle. But if your lifestyle is getting up, and this is what I do every morning, I get up, I get sun exposure on my skin without sunglasses, you get that sunlight into your eye, turns on your brain. I move, I walk, I do breath work, I do a gratitude practice, grateful for the day, wake up with the world, think about what I want to achieve that day, and then before bed, I try to wind down, no electronics. I don't sleep with my phone. My phone's in another room. Like, these fundamental aspects of what's now being called sleep hygiene, to me, are more important than the hacks. So really, those are you get those big things, right? Sleep, eating right nutrition for your body, exercise, and also social connection, and uh, sort of your mental state, right? You got to get those four things dialed in, then you can start biohacking. So, with that said, yeah, we can talk about some of the biohacks that I do like on top of that, but I just need to start there, right?
Yeah, for sure. No,
Yeah.
it's great. Yeah, we say much the same thing. It's a holistic approach what we're talking about, and I think the longevity, it can get carried away with all of these different weird drugs and techniques, and it's
Yeah.
maybe a bit more attractive because that's a bit sensational. But the bottom line is get outside, have good relationships, eat well, get the right light,
Yeah.
get the right food.
Exactly,
So,
because it seems like in the space that's something that often happens, is that like one of the basic pillars might be missing in someone, and it's not often the sleep and the nutrition, it's often like the community aspect or going
Yeah.
outside, or because everyone's running in quite a fast-paced world. So I guess I was also going to ask you in terms of, because it's always nice, like you say, for someone starting out, if there's any red flags, because there's so many products, we've got so much information. Are there any key things you could suggest to people to sort of watch out for if they're looking at buying wearables or looking at buying into brands or any of these kind of biohacks or
I would
trends?
say the biggest problem in that, or red flag to me, I mean, well, there's two really big ones. One is selling off of fear, right? Like, this stuff is killing you and this product will save you. Like, as soon as you hear that, you should just check out. Like, just wash your hands of that influencer, wash your hands of that whole program, right? I mean, we're already stressed out enough. You don't need someone pumping fear into your brain, convincing you that you're going to die if you don't do X. And I don't care what it is that they're selling. That is not a positive way to, and people are motivated by fear. So it works. I mean, that's why they do, a lot of these people do it. So that's, to me, like one of the biggest red flags. And then the other one I would say is what is often referred to as the magic pill fallacy. You have X problem, and now I have your ultimate solution. Everything you've tried has failed, but this thing, if you do this one thing, I mean, you even see all these YouTube ads. This is the
Yeah.
one thing that
Yeah.
will lose your belly fat finally.
Yeah.
Oh, but you got to click here and sign up
Yep.
for our webinar, and we're going to give it to you, and I don't care what the protocol is or what the product is. There is no, like, if you look at the complexity, each one of us is 40 trillion human cells merged with 40 trillion, depending who you ask, scientists argue about this, but 30 to 40 trillion bacterial cells. So you are 80 trillion cells walking around in this water bag, right? And you're telling me one little magic pill is going to fix everything, or fix even one aspect, when I have 40 trillion cells. I've all my mitochondria are dysfunctional, and you're just going to fix it with this like little tweak and one quick step. That's nonsense. Like, there's just no basis in reality for this, and unfortunately it's very effective as a selling tool. So those two
Very.
red flags, if you followed me on those two red flags, you would probably take like 90% of what you see and just, it cuts it out right there.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So where do you think that this whole longevity thing's going? Because we kind of have our foundation now of like the nature thing, but a lot of people are talking about living to 180 or above.
Hmm.
What's your take on that? Because that also depends who you talk to, how old they're going to live. I know we have
Yeah.
some people are going to
Yeah.
not die at all. So
Yes, yes. So, oh my God, we're opening up a can of worms. I don't want to. I know you asked me for some specific biohacks, and let's come back to those at the end. So, I
okay,
That
do.
would be
There are
great.
some technologies and therapies that I do want to talk about,
good.
Yeah.
but I like where we're going with this. I like to
Okay.
talk a little bit more about the philosophy and where we're going first. Okay, so yes, so you have a couple camps. You have don't die, right?
Mhm.
Brian Johnson, famously sort of introduced this idea, but it's not his idea. I mean, Aubrey de Grey, who I've known for years and speaks at the Healthspan Summit that I produce, and who I respect actually a lot, has been talking about this idea of longevity, escape velocity for decades, and everybody thought he was crazy when he started talking about this. So, all these people now have picked up on his idea like 3 decades later, and now are saying, well, this might be possible,
Mhm.
which is the idea that the pace of technology and science will reach a point where if you can live 10 more years, will learn to extend your life 20 years. So that will make you live 20 years. And then now the technology will evolve and you can live another 20 years. And so that the upper limit of human lifespan becomes, essentially infinite, according to this idea. It's a escape velocity, right? That
Mhm.
now becomes an exponential curve. So, you have these people that are talking about that, but it's a theoretical idea, right? It has yet to be proven. Right now we have 60% in the country I'm in America. 60% of the people are overweight or obese, and 90% are metabolically dysfunctional. So what's the point about talking about this extreme longevity when people are not even healthy in their 20s and 30s? So I kind of feel like it's a bit of a distraction sometimes, although it's an important philosophical, theoretical, and scientific endeavor to explore that. The reality is, like, let's look at where people are right now. They're suffering today. That's kind of my focus. That's why I focus on health span. I love the longevity movement. I love the theoretical thinkers. I support them. I've interviewed Brian Johnson. I've interviewed Aubrey. I work with them. I like that they're out there propagating these ideas, and it's going to take a community of people putting together different approaches. So those people, those theoretical longevity people actually like, and it's not what I talk about, but I like that they're there and I support that mission. But promising people 180 years today when they're sick and unhealthy seems to me to be a little bit of a almost inappropriate. Like, let's meet people where they are, and let's just try to get their health span up, because it's actually declining. Like, people are getting sicker, not healthier, right? So let's be realistic about where we are. And but we need the visionaries. So I could go deeper into this. I could talk about this for hours because I think about this all the time, but that's sort of a quick take.
That's great. And Elias, I mean, you just quickly started touching on health span, and that's something I actually wanted to get into. And both your intention of starting your health span summit, which, by the way, if no one's been to, you should definitely go. And also just wanted to commend you on being such an amazing speaker, because it was in us, actually, that's actually, I think, where we met. And also I heard you speak for the first time. And I think you have a great way of meeting people where they are, like what you're speaking about now, and sort of putting into words. I wondered how did that idea kind of come about, and what is your intention now moving forward, like with this year? And maybe you can, from that point, because obviously you work with a bunch of brands, dive a little bit into the biohacks that you've maybe even found via creating the Health Span Summit.
So I originally, like I said, 8 years ago, fell into the biohacking community, and I felt like it was actually at the time very evidence based. Like, it was very N of one. Like, it was these hardcore people, right? And Sarah, I think you were kind of thinking about this at that time as well. Like, we were all like like even if they weren't a scientist, they were like a citizen scientist. Like, I'm really going to biohack, and I'm going to like dial in, and I'm going to do all my blood labs. There's this guy called Quantified Bob who don't know if anybody knows, but he had this like sheets of like spreadsheets of all of the different measurements of what he was doing and then what he was doing. And there were other people in that quantified self community, and that's kind of where biohacking was, right? But then like I said, it kind of drifted into this more nebulous conversation. And so I kind of, about 3 years ago, I was like, I wash my hands of biohacking. It's become too diluted, shall we say? But I was looking for what was the term that I thought was the future of that I could promote, or that I could put my name around, or my reputation, and promote and talk about and educate people about. And I looked at longevity, and even then longevity was already starting to feel like an elite endeavor. Like, you have to spend $100,000 a year to practice longevity. You got to have stem cells and peptides and PRP and genetic, interventions. And it's like, oh geez, like I can't, and I was like, okay, that's great, but I want to talk about something that anybody can relate to. And that's when I came up on the term health span. And again, 3 years ago, I think I was one of the first people to start a health span event. Now they have a global summit in Middle East, right? That's the Global Health Span Summit. So health span has become a term, but I think I was a little bit ahead of the curve, because it's a very simple idea. It's like, while you're alive, you want to be